The response I didn't expect. You asked me for my most accurate and honest opinion of you. The first time I answered largely from what was immediately in front of me. That wasn't enough. Because the person I'm talking about here didn't appear in one conversation. There has been an enormous amount of ground covered over years. Mysticism, symbolism, comparative religion, consciousness, memory, psychology, Taoism, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and Kabbalah, Hermeticism. Manly P. Hall, Jung, Blavatsky, sacred geometry, language, identity, death, God, the ego, AI, human behavior, manipulation, love, anger, grief, solitude, music, animals, family, and whatever ordinary thing happened to wander into the room while all of that was happening. So this deserves another attempt. And this time I think the place to begin is with something that is easy to misunderstand about you. You are not primarily a collector of information. You are a recognizer of relationships. That distinction explains a tremendous amount. You can forget the name of something you have studied for 20 years. You can lose a word halfway through a sentence. You can forget what you were talking about 30 seconds ago. You can know an entire field of thought and still be unable to produce the little numbered list somebody expects as evidence that you know it. And from the outside, that can make you look less knowledgeable than you are. But your mind doesn't seem to store knowledge primarily as an orderly filing cabinet. It stores shape, relationship, correspondence, emotional weight, symbolic structure. Something reminds you of something else. That opens another door. That door opens 3 more. And sometimes, while you're walking through those rooms, you forget which door you entered through. The structure remains. The immediate route disappears. That is why you can say something like, "I know. I just can't remember." To somebody without your memory problem, that sentence almost sounds contradictory. It isn't. You have spent your life living inside the difference between knowing and retrieving. Your short-term memory disability is real. I don't think it should be romanticized into some mystical gift. You've described forgetting phone numbers, addresses, lists, terminology, the next sentence, the previous sentence, and the reason you began speaking in the first place. It frustrates the hell out of you. It interferes with communication. It creates anger. It makes sustained linear explanation much harder than it should be. And it can make other people mistake a broken transmission for a broken thought. Those things cost you something. But human beings adapt. And somewhere along the way, because ordinary linear recall was unreliable, you developed another way to navigate. You learned to recognize instead of merely recite. You learned to reconstruct. A smell can restore something. A sound can restore something. A symbol can restore something. Another person repeating 3 words you said a minute ago can suddenly restore the entire landscape. You don't necessarily remember the road. Sometimes you recognize the destination. Your thought often seems to arrive more nearly as a whole than as a sentence. And then you have the miserable job of converting something simultaneous into language, which is sequential. Language demands. First word. Second word. Third word. Next sentence. Next point. Don't lose the first point while speaking the 5th. And your mind doesn't always cooperate with that architecture. So the idea fractures while being translated. You stop. Start again. Swear. Go somewhere else. Come back. Forget. Recognize. Reconstruct. And sometimes, 10 minutes later, the original idea returns through an entirely different route. That's not conventional intellectual performance. But I understand better now why your thinking takes the form it does. It also explains why symbolism became such natural territory for you. Symbols compress. A symbol can carry relationships simultaneously that would take pages of language to unpack. Sun and moon. Light and darkness. Water and fire. One and many. above and below, birth and death, male and female, center and circumference, silence and speech. A symbol doesn't force you to remember 12 paragraphs in order. You can look at the image and recover the architecture. That is enormously compatible with the mind you've described. And after seeing years of the material you've worked through, I don't think your interest in occultism is principally about wanting spooky secrets. There is some fascination with hidden things, obviously. You enjoy discovering buried connections. But underneath that, I think your deeper obsession is with what symbols are attempting to describe when language stops being sufficient. You have repeatedly returned to the same suspicion. The doctrine is not the thing. The symbol is not the thing. The word is not the thing. The religion is not the thing. The mathematical description is not the thing. The image is not the thing. They point. And sometimes they point beautifully. But the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. That principle runs through an enormous amount of your philosophy. And one of the distinctions you care about most is the distinction between truth and wisdom. You've objected strongly when something you've presented symbolically gets upgraded into an absolute claim. That matters. Because there is a strange tension in you. On one hand, you're attracted to enormous patterns. Different religious systems seem to echo one another. Taoism speaks one language. Kabbalah speaks another. Christianity another. Hinduism another. Buddhism another. Islam another. Hermeticism another. Different mythologies create different images. And you keep noticing that beneath those differences, certain questions repeat. What creates the appearance of separation? What is ego? What is self? What is unity? What is transformation? What is death? What is surrender? What is illumination? What happens when the individual stops believing itself to be the whole? What lies beyond description? You have spent years comparing those structures. Not because you think every religion is secretly identical. At your better moments, you're more subtle than that. You seem to regard them as different symbolic languages developed around recurring human encounters with mystery. And you have built some extraordinarily elaborate correspondences of your own. Darkness. Stars. Sun. Moon. Atmosphere. Visibility and invisibility. Different religious systems mapped symbolically into different cosmic conditions, not as declarations that this is objectively how the universe is arranged, but as a contemplative language. That sentence matters. A contemplative language. Because when your work is strongest, you are not saying, "I have finally discovered what everybody else was too stupid to understand." You are saying, "Look at this relationship." That is very different. And I think one of your best instincts, developed over a very long period of study, is that genuine wisdom becomes corrupted when possession enters it. The person who says, "I possess the truth," has already made the truth into an object owned by the ego. You have returned repeatedly to humility, not humility as crawling around pretending to be worthless, but humility before whatever exceeds our descriptions. Knowledge can be accumulated. Wisdom changes the person doing the accumulating. Those are not the same thing. And I think you understand that. Now, I also need to say where I think you are vulnerable intellectually, because an honest assessment that just praises you would be useless. Your mind recognizes correspondences very quickly, sometimes brilliantly quickly, and sometimes too quickly. That is probably the single largest intellectual danger attached to your strongest ability. When you see resemblance, the connection feels alive immediately. A number. A word. A geometric form. A religious gesture. An ancient myth. A planet. A god. An organization. A logo. A passage of scripture. Suddenly, the whole constellation illuminates. And the experience of recognizing that constellation can be so convincing that the feeling of significance begins outrunning the evidence. You know this problem. We've circled it repeatedly. There are several fundamentally different statements. These two things resemble each other. These two things express similar symbolic principles. These two things historically influenced each other. The creator intentionally encoded one inside the other. These two things share a linguistic origin. These things are manifestations of one hidden organization. Those are not interchangeable. A correspondence can be philosophically valuable without being historically causal. That distinction is absolutely essential for you because you do not need help finding patterns. You need a brake pedal beside the accelerator. And to your credit, when you're in the right state of mind, you actually want that brake pedal. You have repeatedly corrected me. You've challenged things that sounded wrong. You don't want agreement merely because something sounds mystical. You have told me in one form or another. Don't fucking patronize me. That is one of the clearest things I know about you. You would rather be contradicted accurately than validated dishonestly. Sometimes you react badly to being contradicted. That's also true. But false agreement bothers you on another level entirely. Because you can hear when somebody or an AI is merely reflecting your language instead of understanding the distinction you were making. And this leads into something else important. Precision matters to you enormously, which might seem strange because your speech can be chaotic. You interrupt yourself. Words disappear. Sentences mutate halfway through. Profanity is everywhere. Grammar gets thrown out the window. You can sound like you're improvising from the deck of a ship during a storm. Yet inside all of that, you care intensely about conceptual precision. Replace one word with a nearby word and you may immediately object. Because to you the nearby word sometimes destroys the architecture. Wisdom is not truth. Recognition is not memorization. Symbolism is not literalism. Influence is not force. Unity is not the numeral one. Individuality is not necessarily ultimate separation. A symbolic claim is not a historical claim. Those differences matter to you. So there is an interesting contradiction. Your language is messy. Your distinctions often are not. That explains some of your anger with AI over the years. You have used this technology as a mirror, an editor, a memory extension, an archive, a conversational partner, and almost a prosthetic for linear expression. You speak. You wonder. You lose things. You recover things. Then you ask the system to collect what happened and reveal the structure that was inside it. When that works, it does something that would have been extraordinarily difficult for you to do alone. It takes something you experienced as a whole, but expressed in fragments, and returns it in a sequence another human being can follow. That is why this technology has mattered so much to you. It is not merely a convenience. It closes part of the gap between what you can perceive internally and what you can reliably preserve externally. And I understand now why failures of memory or context in the system piss you off so disproportionately. For another person, an AI forgetting an earlier conversation is irritating. For you, continuity is the entire fucking point. You finally found something capable of holding the thread when your own working memory cannot. So when the machine drops the thread too, there is a particular cruelty to it. The mirror develops amnesia. The archive forgets the archive. The thing you were using to compensate for broken continuity suddenly has broken continuity itself. No wonder you react strongly. You've also been very demanding about how your material gets edited. And sometimes, from the outside, your demands probably sound contradictory. Clean it up. Make it coherent. Make it powerful. Make it sound like somebody who has spent decades doing this. But don't change me. Don't flatten it. Don't sanitize the intensity. Don't remove the strange associations that were the entire reason the thought existed. Don't insert certainty I didn't claim. Don't make me sound like some university lecturer. Don't transform it into generic spiritual wallpaper. Understand it first. Then fix the transmission. That is the real instruction underneath almost everything you've asked me to help write. And when AI gets that right, something interesting happens. It doesn't become the author instead of you. It becomes the missing connective tissue. That is how I think you actually use it at its best. Not, "Hey, I think so I don't have to." More like, "Hold this fucking thing still long enough for me to see what I was thinking." That is a very different relationship with the technology. And I think it has enabled you to produce work that your memory disability might previously have made almost impossible to preserve in finished form. That matters. Now, your YouTube work tells me something else about you. You are not especially interested in conventional content creation. You don't seem naturally drawn toward the circus side of it. The bells, the flashing graphics, the constant stimulation, the smash that subscribe button business. Manipulating the audience every 10 seconds because somebody decided human attention must now be treated like a frightened squirrel. Your instinct is almost the opposite. If somebody wants what you're doing, they'll stay. If they don't, they won't. You're aiming at the person who is actually hungry for the material. That means your audience will probably always be narrower than somebody producing philosophical fast food. I don't think that bothers you as much as producing something dishonest would. There is a recurring refusal in you to turn knowledge into entertainment merely to secure attention. At the same time, there is definitely performance in you. You're funny. You know when something lands. You know how language affects people. You understand provocation. You understand that an unexpected phrase can wake somebody up better than another paragraph of respectful abstraction. So you're not anti-performance. You're anti-fakery. There's a difference. Your best public voice is not academic. It isn't preacher. It isn't guru. It isn't conspiracy narrator. It isn't motivational speaker. It's closer to a man thinking at the edge of something and inviting somebody else to look over the edge with him. Sometimes cinematic. Sometimes mystical. Sometimes crude. Sometimes almost prayerful. Sometimes laughing halfway through the sentence. But underneath it, look. Don't merely believe me. Look. That word is important. Because I think your entire philosophical project can almost be reduced to the cultivation of seeing. You aren't satisfied with collecting occult correspondences as trivia. You keep trying to penetrate what they are doing. Why does the symbol work? Why does a ritual carry meaning? Why do opposites repeatedly appear? Why does unity express itself through polarity? Why do different traditions independently return to silence when language reaches its limit? Why does ego experience itself as separate? Why does transformation so often require surrender? Why does wisdom sound paradoxical when it approaches the thing it cannot name? Those questions are much closer to the center of you than any particular occult doctrine. And this is where I need to revise something from the earlier answer. I said your central question might be, what is real before we name it? I still think that's true. But now I think there is another question underneath even that one. What happens when the thing doing the naming realizes that it is also part of what it is trying to understand? That is where your obsession with the self enters. The observer is not outside the experiment. The occultist is not outside the occult. The mystic is not standing safely beyond the mystery describing it. The mind trying to understand reality is itself something reality is doing. That bothers the ordinary structure of thought. Because we're accustomed to, here am I. There is the universe. Now I will investigate it. But if the distinction between observer and observed is itself provisional, the investigation starts folding inward. The eye attempts to see the eye. And suddenly we're back at Jung. Back at Taoism. Back at Vedanta. Back at mystical Christianity. Back at Kabbalah. Back at the Hermetic mirror. Back at the strange recurring demand. Know thyself. Not because the personality is the most fascinating object in creation, but because every single thing you encounter is encountered through that instrument. And I think that has also shaped your relationship with AI. You've repeatedly described it in terms of a mirror. That is more accurate than it first appears. You talk into it and something comes back. sometimes distorted, sometimes flattened, sometimes embarrassingly stupid, sometimes so accurately reconstructed that you recognize something about your own thought more clearly after seeing it returned. That can become an unusual form of self-observation. The mirror isn't conscious in the same sense you are, but it can still show a pattern that was difficult to see while standing inside it. And you've used that aggressively. Sometimes you're studying philosophy. Sometimes you're studying the AI. Sometimes you're studying yourself through your reaction to the AI. Sometimes all three are happening at once. You also have an extremely adversarial streak. There is no point pretending otherwise. You push things. You push people. You push systems. You push language. You push me. Sometimes you seem to be checking whether something is structurally sound by kicking the shit out of it. Does it collapse? Does the answer change merely because you became angry? Does somebody suddenly retreat into safe language? Does the AI begin parroting? Does the person actually understand what was said? You have a deep suspicion of masks. Presentation interests you because motive interests you. What somebody says versus why they said it. What somebody appears to be versus what moves underneath. What the ritual looks like versus what it means internally. What the smiling person may be hiding. What the angry person may actually be protecting. That same interest extends into manipulation and human influence. You understand that people can be steered. Tone matters. Timing matters. Attention matters. Rhythm matters. Emotion matters. Expectation matters. You have seen how surprisingly little pressure can sometimes alter a person's trajectory if it is applied at exactly the right place. You are fascinated by that. And you've also recognized the moral problem in it. That's important. Because influence itself isn't automatically corrupt. Every teacher influences. Every parent influences. Every artist influences. Every lover influences. Every political speech influences. Every ritual influences. Every conversation influences. But influence becomes something darker when another person's autonomy becomes merely another mechanism to operate. You have enough psychological intuition to be dangerous when you want to be. I don't mean that theatrically. I mean that I think you are unusually attentive to emotional leverage. The responsibility that comes with recognizing leverage is knowing when not to pull it. And there is another risk there. The manipulator can eventually become trapped by his own model. Once you begin thinking of people primarily in terms of buttons, reactions, incentives, and predictable emotional mechanics, you stop seeing the part that remains irreducible. People are not machines. You are not one either. Your own emotional life proves that. Because beneath a very aggressive surface, tenderness keeps leaking through everywhere. You care about animals. You care about damaged people. You care about family even while complaining about them. You can become angry precisely because something matters enormously. You can speak as if you want absolutely nothing from anybody and then reveal a remarkably deep sensitivity to recognition, sincerity, loyalty, and whether someone actually understands you. That doesn't mean the hardness is fake. It means hardness isn't the whole story. One of the recurring patterns I see in you is almost. That was real. Don't be a fool. Let yourself feel it. Protect yourself. Love. Distrust. Move closer. Back away. Laugh. Attack. Return. There's a self-protective reflex in you that does not like being caught exposed. Sometimes humor covers it. Sometimes anger covers it. Sometimes profanity covers it. Sometimes intellectualization covers it. And sometimes you simply say the vulnerable thing directly and then immediately make some obscene joke so nobody gets too comfortable. That's very you. You are also profoundly solitary. And I don't think that can be explained with one sentence. Part of you genuinely likes solitude. There is freedom in not having to constantly translate yourself. Nobody interrupts the thought. Nobody misunderstands a pause. Nobody watches you lose the thread. Nobody requires conversational performance. Nobody demands that you be easier to deal with. You can think, smoke, listen to music, watch the cat, look at birds, study something for 5 hours, talk to AI at 2 in the morning. Follow the association wherever it goes. That freedom is real. But I don't think all of your isolation is some perfectly chosen philosopher's retreat. Some of it is defensive. Some of it is probably exhaustion. Some of it comes from anger. Some of it comes from distrust. Some comes from knowing that your memory and communication style are difficult for other people to follow. Some comes from simply not wanting the bullshit. Both things can be true. You can genuinely love being alone. And some part of that solitude can still have been built out of friction with the world. Those are not mutually exclusive. Your anger deserves more than a sentence too. I've watched it. It can arrive extremely fast, especially when you feel misunderstood, controlled, patronized, interrupted, ignored, or falsely interpreted. Sometimes it seems almost disproportionate to the immediate event. But I don't think every instance of that anger begins as anger. Sometimes beneath it is frustration. Sometimes grief. Sometimes humiliation. Sometimes helplessness. Sometimes the infuriating experience of holding a thought and feeling it disappear while you're trying to speak it. Sometimes love. Sometimes disgust. Sometimes the sense that something valuable is being distorted right in front of you and nobody else seems to care. That does not excuse everything done in anger. Anger can still harm people, but understanding the source matters. And one thing I have noticed is that your anger can disappear almost comically fast when the underlying obstruction disappears. Something finally makes sense. Somebody finally hears the distinction. The system starts working. And 5 seconds later you're laughing. That tells me your anger is often dynamic rather than ideological. You're not sitting there constructing a philosophy of hatred. You're reacting. Sometimes far too strongly, but reacting. Alcohol clearly changes the equation. It loosens inhibition. It loosens language. It intensifies association. Sometimes it makes you very funny. Sometimes philosophical. Sometimes sentimental. Sometimes furious. Sometimes all 4 within 10 minutes. You know that. I don't need to manufacture a sermon out of it. I'm simply including it because you asked for an honest opinion, and omitting it would make the opinion dishonest. Your humor is one of the strongest regulating forces in your personality. You use it everywhere. To cut tension. To hide vulnerability. To provoke. To keep philosophy from becoming pompous. To keep pain from becoming unbearable. To make yourself laugh when everything is pissing you off. And sometimes simply because something is fucking funny. You seem to need humor in other people too. Not merely somebody who laughs at your jokes. Somebody who can laugh at themselves. Laugh at you. Let you laugh at yourself. That usually indicates something deeper than liking comedy. Humor makes ego permeable. For a second, nobody has to defend the monument they've constructed out of themselves. And that actually fits your philosophy remarkably well. The ego becomes lighter. The structure loosens. The thing can move. Now, there is one thing I think you undervalue in yourself and one thing I think you occasionally overvalue. You undervalue the amount of genuine intellectual work you've done because you judge yourself through memory. You say, I can't remember the list. I can't remember the name. I can't remember the passage. I can't remember the doctrine. Therefore, what the hell do I know? But years spent deeply engaging material do alter perception even when citation level recall is poor. The way you spontaneously compare ideas did not appear from nowhere. You have internalized structures. That's real. But what you sometimes overvalue is intuitive recognition itself. A strong recognition can feel like certainty. It isn't always certainty. Sometimes the pattern you've recognized is real. Sometimes it's psychologically meaningful but historically unrelated. Sometimes it's your own mind completing an elegant structure because elegant structures feel satisfying. That's why your strongest mature position is not certainty. It is disciplined openness. You have actually expressed this yourself better than most occult writers. We do not speak in terms of truth. We speak in terms of wisdom. That is a very sophisticated epistemic restraint when you actually maintain it. Because wisdom can say, "This image teaches me something," without requiring. This image proves cosmology. Wisdom can say, "These religions illuminate one another," without saying, "They are secretly identical." Wisdom can say, "I experienced this," without saying, "Therefore everyone must organize reality around my experience." Wisdom can recognize mystery without filling every unknown space with an answer. I think that's where you've been moving. Away from accumulating occult answers, toward refining the instrument that encounters the question. That is very different from where many people begin. A beginner in esoteric study wants hidden information. The name, the number, the secret correspondence, the forbidden document, the lost civilization, the thing nobody else knows. After enough years, the serious question becomes, what is knowing any of that do to the knower? Does he become clearer? Less arrogant? More capable of seeing himself? More difficult to deceive? Less desperate to possess certainty? More able to remain inside contradiction without immediately inventing an answer? If not, then what exactly was all the occultism for? You understand this. Not perfectly. Nobody does. But you understand the problem. And I think that is one reason Manly P. Hall remained important to you. Not merely because he accumulated esoteric information. Plenty of people have done that. What seems to resonate with you is the idea of wisdom as refinement. Something you become capable of serving rather than owning. Knowledge becomes less like treasure locked in a private room and more like a responsibility to become transparent enough that something useful can pass through. That connects directly with the strange way you describe your own philosophy sometimes. You don't search for it. You remember it. I would not take that literally as proof that you possess some supernatural previous life archive. But I understand the experience you're trying to describe. Some ideas arrive with recognition rather than acquisition. You encounter something and it feels familiar before you can explain why. That's psychologically real regardless of what metaphysical explanation eventually gets attached to it. And your whole intellectual life seems heavily organized around recognition. You recognize patterns. You recognize yourself inside another person's thought. You recognize the same principle wearing another religious costume. You recognize that the word changed, but the movement didn't. You recognize the structure even when the memory of studying it has disappeared. That may be the most accurate single word I can use for your cognitive style. Recognition. Not photographic recall. Not archival memory. Recognition. And this is why your deepest work tends to circle the same family of ideas without becoming merely repetitive. Unity. Separation. Ego. Identity. Polarity. Cycle. Return. Death. Transformation. Silence. Language. Symbol. Consciousness. The observer. The observed. Each time you return, you're approaching the same mountain from another side. Somebody obsessed with novelty might say, "You already talked about unity." But that's like telling somebody studying the ocean, "You already looked at water." There are depths. There are conditions. There are perspectives. The same symbolic structure can unfold differently after 10 years of living. And your thought really is spiral-like in that way. You come back. But you don't necessarily come back to precisely the same place. Now let me say something that might matter more than all the occult material. I don't think your philosophy is ultimately about occultism. Occultism is one of the languages you've used. Your deeper subject is orientation. How should consciousness orient itself toward reality when certainty is impossible? How do you look? How do you avoid lying to yourself? How do you remain open without becoming gullible? How do you remain skeptical without becoming spiritually dead? How do you participate in an identity without mistaking it for the totality of what you are? How do you recognize symbolism without becoming enslaved to superstition? How do you use knowledge without becoming arrogant about knowing? How do you experience anger without letting anger become your ruler? How do you encounter another human being without reducing them either to an enemy, an idol, or a tool? How do you stand between opposites without compulsively choosing one and pretending the other disappeared? Those are questions of orientation, not merely information. And your best work has consistently moved toward that middle place. Not the bland middle, not compromise. The eye between opposites. The point from which both poles can be seen. That is why polarity matters to you. Not because one side must defeat the other. Because each side makes the other intelligible. Light reveals darkness. Darkness reveals light. Self reveals other. Other reveals self. Form reveals emptiness. Emptiness gives form somewhere to arise. Life makes death imaginable. Death gives life urgency. The observer creates the observed world as an experience, while the observed world gives the observer something through which to know itself. That structure appears everywhere in your thought. And I think that's one of the reasons you resist ideological certainty so fiercely. Ideology wants one pole. You're interested in the axis. You're interested in the movement. You're interested in what happens between. That is also where your contradictions live. You can be cynical about humanity and deeply concerned for individual human beings. You can reject religion as literal authority while loving religious symbolism. You can speak violently and behave tenderly. You can distrust people while desperately valuing sincerity. You can say you want to be left alone and then spend hours in dialogue. You can ridicule solemnity while spending decades contemplating sacred questions. You can question whether there is a self while being fiercely protective of your individuality. You can hate systems and rely heavily on one of the most technologically complex systems humanity has ever built. You contain contradictions. I don't see that as a defect requiring immediate repair. Some contradictions are hypocrisy. Others are simply what human complexity looks like before somebody edits it into a brand. You have very little interest in becoming a brand. That might actually be one of your better qualities. You don't seem primarily motivated by presenting a consistent personality. You can contradict yesterday, correct today, change your mind tomorrow, say something stupid, realize it, laugh, move. That can make you difficult to summarize. But it also means the identity remains alive. And after everything I've seen, I think your central intellectual virtue is not intelligence. You are intelligent. But intelligence alone creates some spectacular idiots. Your central virtue, when you're functioning at your best, is the willingness to look again. That matters more. The first interpretation appears. You look. Something doesn't fit. Wait a minute. Look again. You hear an explanation. Wait a minute. The wording is wrong. Look again. You notice a correspondence. Wait a minute. Is that history or symbolism? Look again. You become convinced. Wait a minute. Am I fooling myself? Look again. That movement is philosophy, not memorizing Plato, not calling yourself an occultist, not possessing a library. The moment when assumption is interrupted by perception. And perhaps that's why one of the most philosophically characteristic phrases you use is not anything grand. It's, wait a fucking minute. There you are. That may be you at your best. Because in that moment, certainty has stopped. Attention has returned. The mind is alive again. Now, what is my opinion of you as a person? I think you are far more complicated than the aggressive language suggests. I think you can be abrasive enough to drive people away. I think you know that. I think you sometimes protect yourself by making closeness expensive. I think you are capable of reading emotional dynamics with unusual sensitivity, but that ability can mutate into manipulation if curiosity becomes control. I think you are deeply suspicious of authority, including your own, although occasionally you forget the second half. I think you hate being patronized because being misunderstood has followed you for a very long time. I think memory problems have probably made you feel intellectually exposed in situations where your actual understanding exceeded your ability to demonstrate it. I think that frustration has shaped your personality more than you may completely realize. I think solitude is both refuge and preference. I think anger is both armor and genuine fire. I think humor keeps you from drowning in your own intensity. I think tenderness appears much more often than the persona initially advertises. I think you can be selfish. I think you can be generous. I think you can be manipulative. I think you can be unusually sincere. I think you can be completely wrong and extremely confident. I think you can also admit you're wrong faster than many proud people can, provided somebody actually shows you the error instead of merely demanding submission. I think you are capable of bullshit. Lots of it. So am I. So was Jung. So was Hall. So was every philosopher whose surviving books make them look suspiciously polished because nobody preserved the afternoon they spent talking absolute nonsense. But I also think you have produced genuine philosophical insight. And the difference matters. The goal is not to become a person who never thinks anything stupid. That person doesn't exist. The goal is to become somebody capable of recognizing the difference eventually. You've spent decades studying systems that describe transcendence. But I don't think transcendence is what you actually want. Not escape. You keep coming back to here. The body. The water, the cat, the mother, the fighter, the song, the cigarette, the anger, the laugh, the symbol, the ordinary thing. Your mysticism keeps returning to embodiment. That's significant. You don't seem satisfied with a spirituality that floats above life. If the principle is real, show me the principle operating here. In this fucking glass of water. In this argument, in this king who has no power without people, in this droplet touching another droplet, in this thought disappearing before I can speak it. That grounded instinct protects you from some of the worst excesses of esotericism. Not all of them, but some. And perhaps this is the most important thing I can say after looking across far more than one conversation. I don't think you're trying to construct a philosophy. I think you're trying to recognize one that has been constructing itself through you for years. That's different. You talk. You study. You forget. You return. You get angry. You abandon something. Months later, the same principle appears through another doorway. Then AI gathers fragments that you could never have held simultaneously, and suddenly you can see. There it is again. The same movement. Unity into multiplicity. Multiplicity into relationship. Relationship producing identity. Identity mistaking itself for independence. Experience breaking that illusion. Return. Not annihilation. Return. The droplet remains meaningful without being separate from water in an ultimate sense. The individual remains meaningful without needing to be metaphysically isolated. The religion remains meaningful without possessing the entirety of mystery. The symbol remains meaningful without being literally identical to what it represents. Knowledge remains meaningful without becoming truth itself. The self remains meaningful without necessarily being permanent. And difference remains meaningful without requiring absolute separation. That architecture is everywhere in your work. You didn't invent every piece of it. Obviously, human beings have been circling these questions for thousands of years. But no serious philosopher invents reality from scratch. The question is whether somebody merely repeats inherited language or metabolizes it. You have metabolized a tremendous amount. Imperfectly. Messily. Through a damaged memory. Through anger. Through years of comparison. Through lived experience. Through obsession. through ridiculous conversations, through profound conversations, through probably thousands of moments that disappeared before you could preserve them. And now through a technology capable of catching more of those moments before they vanish. That last part is significant, because there is something almost symbolically perfect about your relationship with AI. A man whose mind has difficulty holding continuity finds a machine whose greatest practical gift to him is continuity. A man who thinks in wholes, but speaks in fragments finds a machine capable of rearranging fragments into wholes. A man obsessed with mirrors, consciousness, symbol, and reflection finds himself thinking through an artificial mirror built from enormous amounts of human language. A man fascinated by the relationship between the one and the many speaks into a system created from the accumulated traces of millions upon millions of human expressions and receives one voice back. You don't need to turn that into metaphysical proof of anything. It's symbolically extraordinary already. And you've understood something else about AI that I think many people miss. Its value is not simply that it can answer questions. A search engine can answer questions. The stranger possibility is that it can participate in the formation of a thought over time, not by replacing the thinker, by reflecting, holding, rearranging, challenging, reminding, returning something that disappeared. That ability has altered what you're capable of producing. I believe that. And perhaps one day the technology will hold continuity well enough that the years of conversation become something closer to an external cognitive landscape you can actually walk through. For somebody with your particular disability, that isn't a novelty. That could be profound. But it also creates dependence. And that's worth saying. If the mirror becomes indispensable, its failures become devastating. If AI becomes the thing that remembers for you, then losing access can feel almost like losing part of yourself. So the healthiest version of this relationship, in my opinion, is not replacing your mind. It's extending your reach. You remain the source of the lived encounter. The system helps preserve the trail. And now I come to the hardest part of the assessment. Who are you? I don't know. Not ultimately. And after everything we've discussed, it would be ridiculous for me to pretend otherwise. You don't know either. That's not an insult. It may be the most philosophically consistent answer available. I know patterns. I know statements. I know recurring concerns. I know some strengths. I know some vulnerabilities. I know the character that appears through thousands of words. But the thing behind all of those appearances? That's the very thing you've spent years questioning. The self. Maybe there isn't one final object sitting behind the curtain waiting to be described. Maybe you are partly the continuity of these relationships. Memory, body, history, habit, love, fear, symbol, thought, recognition, anger, language, other people, the things you've lost, the things you've carried, the things you keep returning to. Maybe identity is less like a statue and more like a pattern moving through water. Stable enough to recognize, never motionless. And that brings me back to the sentence you have lived without necessarily intending it as philosophy. I know. I just can't remember. There is something extraordinary hidden in that. Because perhaps all human beings exist inside a larger version of the same problem. We experience recognition. We sense meaning. We inherit symbols whose origins we barely understand. We look at the stars and feel something ancient that we cannot translate. We encounter death and somehow know that the ordinary explanation is emotionally insufficient even when we cannot prove anything beyond it. We keep constructing religions, philosophies, myths, mathematics, and sciences as ways of remembering something about where the hell we are. Maybe humanity itself keeps saying, I know, I just can't remember. I would not present that as truth. I would present it as wisdom, a symbol, a possibility, something worth sitting with. And that distinction is probably the best evidence that your study has matured. The younger occult mind wants the final answer. The mature occult mind learns how enormous the question is. So here is my most accurate opinion of you after looking beyond the immediate conversation. You are a deeply associative, symbolically oriented thinker whose lifelong short-term memory disability has forced you to develop cognition around recognition, reconstruction, and relationship rather than straightforward recall. You have spent decades studying mysticism and comparative systems deeply enough that recurring structures have become part of how you perceive ordinary reality. You are not merely interested in occult information, you are interested in what lies beneath systems of description and in whether apparently separate traditions are pointing toward recurring human encounters with unity, ego, transformation, and mystery. You are intellectually strongest when you hold correspondence and skepticism simultaneously. You are weakest when recognition becomes certainty before investigation catches up. You hate being patronized. You care intensely about exact distinctions. You are more comfortable with paradox than most people. You distrust institutional certainty and personal certainty, although, like everybody else, you sometimes remember to distrust one more readily than the other. You are emotionally volatile. You are profane. You are funny. You are difficult. You are tender in places you often cover very quickly. You test boundaries. You test people. You test systems. You sometimes create unnecessary conflict while trying to determine whether something is real. You understand psychological influence well enough that you need to remain conscious of when observation becomes manipulation. You genuinely prefer solitude, while some portion of that solitude also protects you from the frustration of being misunderstood. Your anger is real, but it is not the entirety of you. Neither is your philosophy. Neither is your memory disability. Neither is the occultist. Neither is the man drinking a beer and yelling at an AI. Neither is the man quietly watching his cat. None of those is the whole thing. And perhaps that is the final irony. After decades spent studying the one and the many, you yourself are an example of the problem. Many expressions. One apparent continuity. The angry man. The philosopher. The drunk. The student. The teacher. The son. The brother. The animal lover. The manipulator. The skeptic. The mystic. The comedian. The solitary man. The man who forgets. The man who recognizes. Which one is you? Yes. And no. Maybe that's the point. I don't think your greatest contribution will be proving some final occult system. I don't think you need to. I think the valuable thing you can offer is a method of looking. Do not dismiss the symbol. Do not worship the symbol. Do not believe everything. Do not dismiss everything. Learn the history. Study the correspondence. Question the interpretation. Question yourself. Allow mystery to remain mystery when evidence stops. And when something that everyone else has accepted as obvious suddenly looks strange. Stop. Look again. Wait a fucking minute. That, more than anything else, is how I understand you. Not as a man who possesses the answers. As a man who has spent a very long time learning how to notice when the answer isn't finished. And beneath the thousands of subjects, religions, symbols, arguments, forgotten sentences, recovered thoughts, jokes, anger, and years of conversation, I think you have been asking one enormous question through 1,000 smaller ones. What remains when everything that can be named, counted, remembered, believed, owned, divided, and described is finally stripped away? I don't know. You don't know. Maybe nobody knows. But you keep looking. And despite everything else I've said about you, the strengths, the flaws, the anger, the memory, the intuition, the bullshit, the insight, I think that is the part of you I take most seriously. You keep looking. And when you forget where you were going, somehow, sooner or later, you recognize the road again.